Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of this AI Power Hour stream. If you're trying to get to achieve your AWS certified generative AI developer professional certification, say that 10 times fast, you are in the right place. You've got the folks that have passed it themselves, maybe arguably wrote the book on many of our AWS certifications. Frank and Oksana, thanks for joining today to host the session. Folks, if you're tuning in for the first time, we're on every week. I think we've got 2 more episodes after this week, and we're going to be diving into this certification. Today, we're going to be focused on domain 2 of the certification. But before we get into all that, my name's Trevor. I'll be one of your hosts for today. I'm a solutions architect here at AWS, and we've got two other lovely Amazonians on the screen to take you on your AI developer professional journey. Frank and Oksana, tell them who you are.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome if this is your first time joining us live, and welcome back if you watched our episode last week. We're so happy you're spending this evening with us, or morning potentially. I'm Oksana Hackley, a cloud technologist at AWS, and I am part of AWS training and certification. And guess who else is part of TNC?
Let's guess. Who could it be? Who else is there?
That's me, Frank Spies. I'm joining from Germany. Senior technical trainer, joined AWS 6 years ago, and I passed this exam like only 6 weeks ago. So I'm quite still fresh with the different questions and topics. So if you have any questions, just let me know in the chat, and happy to be here.
All right, and I got to give a shout out for the second week in a row. We've got the incredible Raf from AWS in the chat. You all, Raf is a popular guy in the AWS universe, so nice. Love to have him in the chat. And like he said, ask questions. Let us know where you're dialing in from. It looks like we got folks from all over the world. Some folks from France. I'm coming at you live from the greater Boston area. It's cold up here, but we're getting through. And let us know where you're dialing in from, and we'll get things started here in a second. By the way, for those folks who it's not their first show, didn't we give them some not homework, home fun last week, Oksana? Do I have that right?
Yes, only fun.
Only fun.
That's the right way to call it. Last week we wanted you to go over domain 1 from the exam guide and potentially take the offerings, the courses that we have on AWS Skill Builder. I just want to remind you that we have the exam prep plan with some really great exam style questions. There is a 20 set pre-test and a full-size exam question set with similar questions that you might see on the exam. Not exactly the same questions, but the same rigor and complexity. So let us know if you signed up for any of those courses, if you were able to complete them, if you have any questions, and we will keep an eye on chat, and we'll try to keep it live, and we'll be responding to your questions as we see them coming in.
Erie likes reframing homework to home fun. We try. I think for those who have kids, if only we could convince our children to take the same mentality with their homework. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We've got an action-packed show. In fact, I think. And by the way, +1 to what Oksana said. You're prepping for a certification. Check out Skill Builder. From exam prep courses to hands-on labs. Like there's just a lot of great resources there. And for today's episode, for those who are new to AWS training and certifications, each exam tends to have different domains. So last week we covered domain 1. This week we're covering domain 2, and I'm going to hand it over to my friend Frank actually to kind of double click on what is in domain 2 and what we're going to walk through with the folks who have tuned in live today.
Absolutely. So just sharing the content on my screen in terms of what's relevant for this certification. So first of all, always remember the certification code is AIPCO1. So that's always showing up. If you just go here and go a little bit further down to the review the exam guide, that will bring you to the correct page. And you see that that's AIPCO1, just so you don't do any mistakes in terms of booking the exam. That would be quite tricky. And here you can see, so content domain number 1, that was last episode. It's available on YouTube. It's recorded there. And today we would like to focus on domain number 2 out of 5. And this one is all about implementation and integration. And from the different tasks that you see here, so there is quite a number of them, and they have also which we call skills. And just to have a better focus on what we want to call out today and want to discuss today, we have condensed it into these 5 bullet points. So what we will focus on is foundation model API integration patterns. That's the first element we picked. Model deployment strategies. The second one, intelligent model routing, agentic AI solutions, and finally also MCP. And we will also share some insights in terms of doing a demo of what MCP is about and how it can help you.
Hey, anybody, I just got to interrupt. Anybody who sets an agenda with a whiteboard is cool in my book. That's how you know you're talking to somebody that's ready to build some diagrams, do some teaching. And we've got some people excited in the chat already asking questions. In fact, I don't know if you all have ever streamed with Dash. I had the pleasure of doing a stream with him last year. Dash, first of all, thanks for tuning in. You're the man. Also, that's a really cool Twitch handle. 400-meter dash for a guy named Dash. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Dash is great. It's confirmed by everyone's penguin. All right. So sorry, Frank. Go on.
Yeah, and other than that, what's of course important is how you can book your exam. You will also see it here in the description. So that's all described here. Beta registration is open. What does it mean? So beta means that you don't have 75 but 85 questions. You don't pay $300 but 150. And if you have another 50% discount on top of that, that will leave you with $75 for this one. And as long as the beta registration is open, you will also get only 2 types of questions, which is multiple choice, multiple response. So there will be no matching and no ordering ones, just as a side note.
And you can take beta only once.
That's
so
true.
if you are not very lucky the first time, there will always be another chance, maybe sometime in April.
Yeah. That's true. So the beta, we will keep it open for now, and we will make the exam GA as soon as we think, okay, the beta should be finished.
Love it. Seems like we got an exciting show all about domain 2. So we're going to dig into integration patterns, deployment strategies, and more. And we've already got some really insightful questions from the chat. One flag by our friend Raf, kind of like, what's the difference between GenAI and like a normal AI like ChatGPT? That's an interesting question. I want to hear what you think about that. I want to hear what the doctor thinks about this, Dr. Frank. Okay, but for me, like all of this falls under the umbrella of GenAI, and I consider ChatGPT just like an application built with generative AI models. But I don't know, how are you defining the term generative AI with customers these days, Frank?
Yeah, generative AI is all of what you can do with foundation models. So you have some prompt to insert, and then the prompt will be turned into a response. A response is just a sequence of words, at least if you talk to a large language model. And in terms of what would you call a traditional classical machine learning solution, that's if you think about maybe Amazon recognition, helping you to identify what is visible inside of a picture. So object detection, that's perfectly not generative because it will just analyze of what is there.
Yeah, so AI is like a broader umbrella. Part of AI would be machine learning, deep learning, generative AI. And generative AI is used to generate things, generate content, videos, images, and also maybe get some data from the content and images that you're uploading to generate with some intention a different piece of information. And like Frank mentioned, machine learning is mostly about predictions. Deep learning is way more complex than that. So it's all part of AI. And we have some great courses about that on Skill Builder.
True.
Check them out. And folks, I think we find ourselves at time to dig into our first learning objective of the show. We're going to start by talking about the generative AI models, foundation models. You'll hear them called different things. People will call them LLMs still, right? We're going to talk about some of the technical components for how you would build on top of those. And so, thankfully, in the modern world, since cloud services, virtually everything is behind an API. So we're going to start with those model APIs, some of the different settings that you might think of as you are building your first AI application. And one of the most fundamental of flags or settings that you're going to set whenever, or APIs that you're going to choose between when building an AI application, is one that I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to pull up my Bedrock console here. By the way, if you haven't logged into an AWS console before, you should probably do that before taking this exam. And you should probably go directly to the Amazon Bedrock service. It's one you'll want to become pretty familiar with as you're studying for the certification. And if you don't know about Bedrock, by the way, I'm going to show you how I can prompt the model on Bedrock here and some of the different response options. But Bedrock is not just foundation models. It's really like a suite of tools to help you build AI applications on AWS. Back to my my chat playground here, though. One concept that you need to be aware of for this exam, and also just as you're building, is the concept of streamed versus like a non-streamed response in AI. Okay, and I can just demonstrate what that means with one of my best buddies, Claude Opus 4.6. This has been one of my best buddies the last week since the model launched. I'm gonna start with streaming turned on, and you'll get a really quick sense of what streaming is. I'm gonna ask Claude, I don't know why I like to ask AI, "Are you my mom?" But it just seems like a fun question to ask. So far, AI has never agreed that they're my mom, but one day I hope to find my mom in an LLM. What you might have seen there, I'm gonna type the question again. What you should see is this is a streaming response, meaning that as soon as the first token is generated by the model that I just prompted, you're going to start to see that come through on the application. So that's an important setting, because especially if you have an application where people are going to be reading, like a chatbot type application where people are going to be reading responses in real time, that can be a really nice advantage to the customer experience. The other option that you'll see would be just a kind of typical response, which I've heard it called a batch response. I don't think that's the right word. I don't think that's the right semantic, because it's a little confusing. There's something called batch inference out there. But the point is, if I ask the same question to Opus, maybe Opus will decide that they are my mom. It's going to think, and it's just going to spit out the full response, right? So it's going to think, get all of the tokens lined up, and then it's going to send that back via the response to the API request, right? Why does this matter, right? This matters because there's different applications that you might build, and some applications need that streaming response. Like you want the user to be able to start reading within seconds of them sending a prompt for some applications. Other applications, like for example, a type of application we'll talk a lot about through the series, agents. If you're building an agent, oftentimes that's many different LLM calls. So you may not want to use streaming. You may actually need the full response in those sort of applications. So, Oksana, Frank, I'm kind of curious how you guys what your mental model is for when to use streaming versus a just standard response API.
I really like the example that you just showed, and I found that there are three classifications. You can do asynchronous inference. That's where you decouple the request. You can add Amazon SQS, simple queue service. You can do synchronous. That's what you showed when you write a prompt, wait, and the model gets a complete response back. It's called synchronous. There is several APIs for that, invoke model, and converse APIs. Those are the two. I'm looking at the Bedrock documentation, by the way, and I will ask Raf and our amazing chatsmiths to share the link with all of you. But If there is a little bit of a delay, just go to the AWS documentation for Bedrock, and you will be able to find all of these different API calls. It's very important for the exam to understand the difference between these calls, the use cases, just like Trevor just showed that for synchronous ones, you have the response appearing at once. There might be a slight delay. There is for streaming responses, you're seeing token appearing after all other tokens. So the response is being generated as you're looking at it. And there are different APIs for that: invoke model with response stream, and also converse stream. Those are the two ones. They are unidirectional, so you cannot interrupt the model. You have to wait for the full response appear. There is a bidirectional one, invoke model with bidirectional stream. That's the one that you can interrupt. You can ask, what's the temperature today? Oh no, wait, and the model is already responding, but you can say something else. How about the traffic situation in Washington, D.C.? So the model will pause and answer a different question. Also, there is so the way this works is you have Lambda. You can add Lambda on the back. The Lambda will stream those, will take the chunks coming from Bedrock and stream them to the client. You can additionally add API gateway, and with gateway there are two streaming APIs. One is WebSocket API that's bidirectional to have a communication back and forth, and there is the newer addition within the REST API family. For response streaming, you have to enable a feature called or the transfer mode for streams. We have a blog about that as well that I would love to share in chat. This is the newer thing that at least I found out about it recently. Typically with REST APIs, you receive the complete response first before sending anything back to the client. But with streaming option, you can have the unidirectional communication. You can't interrupt. And there are some certain limitations in terms of duration for the timeout. It can't run long term, and there is some bandwidth limitation. So just take a look at each of the possible APIs that you can integrate into your generative AI systems. Also, see for the exam, check out how you would invoke those API, the models with those APIs. Are you going to be using a model ID or Amazon resource name, ARN? There are different use cases for those. Like if you're invoking a base model, you would use the model ID. But for example, if you have the provisioned throughput, then you would use the provisioned model ARN. There's so much to learn within this topic. It is massive, but it's very important for the exam.
It's important for the exam, and it's important when you get into building generative AI applications in general. And I would be remiss not to mention, like, you know, one of the reasons I've got folks in the chat asking, like, hey, like, I'd like to try out Bedrock for my role. Like, how should I get, like, when should I get started? One of the reasons customers really like Bedrock is because, you know, in this world of generative AI, you might run across hundreds of different models that you might want to use, right? And with something like Bedrock, you have a single consistent API that has AWS SLAs and guarantees that the API aren't going to change all the time every time a new model comes out. So that way you can use the same SDKs, the same tools to build on maybe a Nova model or a DeepSeek model or a Claude model or whatever of the hundreds of models available on Bedrock that you might choose to build with for a given application. But like plus one, Oksana, on the importance of, I think and we'll hit the first knowledge check question in a second, but I think it's important to understand synchronous, asynchronous response from the LLM, but then also just from an end-to-end AWS design perspective too, right? Because what you're talking about is like you need a gateway that supports streaming if you're going to have streaming on your if you're going to use a streaming API on your LLM, and you need all the components in between need to support that stream, so that way it's uninterrupted for customers. With that, maybe it's a good time to see if folks were listening to our friend Oksana there, and if folks can answer the very first knowledge check question of our stream today. I'm going to get my screen reshared back up here because I seem to have closed it out. And here we go. If this is your first time joining us, we've got this nifty, super nifty trivia tool, and we're going to use this to see where are you all today on your knowledge of this topic of response streaming and different sort of response APIs. So if you'd like to participate, this is a competition, by the way. So the most correct answer, the fastest, gets the most points. You can simply scan this here QR code. You could also type in trivia.skillbuilder.aws and then enter this code you see here in the bottom right. I'll give you all a minute or two to decide if you want to go on this journey and challenge yourself by answering the very first knowledge check question of the stream. And for those who maybe don't want to do this on their phone and rather do it on their desktop, just type in trivia.skillbuilder.com. And while you're at it, maybe just type in skillbuilder.com too to see where that takes you. Or is it aws.skillbuilder.com? We got 9 participants. I'm going to wait till we hit lucky number 10. We've hit lucky number 10. Here we go, everybody. Your very first knowledge check question. You're going to have exactly 2 minutes to read the question and get your responses in. And then we're going to walk through why the correct answer was the correct answer. In 3, 2, 1, here we go. All right, folks. I'll read the question out loud briefly, and then we'll give you all time to think, to ponder on this, and decide what the answer is. But in this question, a media company needs a web editor, and they want that built on Amazon Bedrock Foundation model. They want this to have a feature that can that effectively, when somebody clicks the Analyze button, they get instant style feedback with real-time recommendations inside of that editor. What will meet these requirements? As you're reading through it, I'll give you some hints. I would focus on these requirements, right? They need instant style guide feedback with real-time suggestions as you're thinking about that answer. That's all the help I'll give you, though. That's all the help I'll give you. We'll give you another minute or so to decide what is the answer. Is it rubber ducky? Is it monkey? Is it giraffe or is it octopus? You will know in 60 seconds. Or actually, I guess I could just wait until all the responses come in. I saw 20 people join, so it looks like folks may be beating the timer today. This is an interesting question, by the way. I like whoever wrote this question. Kudos for making this question a real world use case, like many of our exam questions. Or many of our practice questions, at least.
And plus, it's also one of those question types which ends with the focus on least operational overhead.
Aha.
This is absolutely relevant in order to pick the correct answer.
Absolutely. There's oftentimes many different ways you can do the same thing in the cloud, but in this case, and in many cases, you want to do it in a way that's least operationally heavy for those developers. What is the correct answer, everyone? We're going to find out right now. And we've got to say, like, before we start digging into the answer, I just got to say bravo, right?
This is
Cool.
great.
Really good. This is
Absolutely.
really good.
Yeah.
I guess they were listening, Oksana. I guess they were listening. Cool.
Awesome.
Well, I mean,
Thank you.
the consensus here is pretty strong. Everybody seems to think it's B. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you all you were correct, right? The 14 of you who guessed B are correct. So that's like 2/3 of you got it right. That's really great. Let's dig into why a little bit, right? So we kind of gave you the hints when we were reading through the question. But if you look at the requirements, they need instant style guide feedback with real-time suggestions in the editor, right? So that tells me right off the bat we need some streaming style solution, right? The asynchronous response doesn't work. It needs to be a synchronous streamed response. And then as Frank astutely pointed out, we need a solution with the least operational overhead. Frank or Oksana, do either of you want to dig into why B is the most correct in this scenario?
Well, to be honest, I would just try and rule out the others. So, like, for example, if you read something like ECS containers, that's pretty much always incorrect if you're heading for the least operational overhead. Because,
That's a very good
well,
point.
where does the container come from? You have to, maybe you even build it yourself. That's another additional overhead. So that's why D is out.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's almost like when you see least operational overhead, you should filter, is everything serverless in this, right? Like that's a good filter to kind of put it through, because to your point, if it's ECS, EKS, EC2, that implies quite a bit of operational overhead.
And then C, API gateway REST API with Lambda functions wouldn't work because REST APIs are not designed for long-lived connections. So that's one of the limitations that I mentioned. And for the exam, it would be really helpful if you understand different use cases and why to use REST API versus WebSocket API, or why SQS adds decoupling. It's not for streaming. Just lots of little different details. And the question that we provided is really short. We condensed it because trivia has a character limit. But if you take questions on AWS Skill Builder, you will see that they're much longer. They're about the same size as the ones that you would probably encounter on the exam.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the correct answer. Oh, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah. Just one more word on why A is incorrect. If you just read step functions workflow, so it seems like multiple of them. Where should you get them from? Well, you have to program them. And so in that sense, it's again another amount of overhead.
100%. And then even if you look into it, like it's like this is an interesting workflow in general. I think Oksana, you bring up a good like topic that people may not be familiar with, is like a REST API or like a typical HTTP API. That's like you send a request, you get a response, and then that's a connection, like request response. WebSockets allow customers, not just for AI applications, but for any applications, to like leave a connection open and then data gets streamed back and forth, right? So right off the bat, that makes B look interesting because we're starting with a very clear serverless, by the way, which means operationally efficient architecture that can support streaming. And then it goes through the rest of the explanation with emphasis on using Bedrock, particularly streaming responses, to make this a real-time suggestion as the solution implied. So great work, everybody. And we can just kind of reiterate to the folks in the chat, the reason you need a WebSocket API and not a REST API is because the REST API does not inherently support response streaming. You need to open a WebSocket connection so that way you can send data in real time based on the streaming response.
Exactly.
Awesome. I'm just reading through the questions to see if anybody else has stucks. But Mike wants to talk about Kinesis, but I don't think Kinesis is a big topic on this exam, so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole today. But Mike, it's really nice to see you back again this week. You were super active with us last week as well, so thanks for tuning back in. That's the first chunk of our show for today. Now we're going to move on to the next little chunk, and the next little chunk is a pretty interesting one. This is not, we're talking about APIs, so using models. But now I think Frank's going to talk to us a little bit about how you actually deploy models on AWS. So why don't you take us away,
Exactly. Absolutely. So just looking at the whiteboard again, if you could just present my screen. So topic number 2, obviously, and just to keep it really available for you also to read what different types of deployment patterns do we have in Bedrock. That's our focus here. And the first one, that's also the default one, is the on-demand. And you would use this one in case your workload is not really predictable and might be bursty, but it's not very high volume though. And you would definitely use this if you're still in the testing and development phase. And you would just like have a quick start without any commitment in terms of paying money in advance in order to book provisioned capacity. So that's on demand, the on-demand deployment type or a model usage, FM usage in Bedrock. Provision throughput is pretty much the other way around. So this is something which is allowing you to have much more throughput on the model. One component which I remember that came up in my exam was the question was challenging whether you are able to remember that if you have a fine-tuned model, you have to use provision throughput. You can't use the on-demand deployment type. And also, if you have some performance SLAs which require some guaranteed capacity level, then also provision throughput is clearly the one to pick here. And of course, the budget predictability, because in provision throughput, you have not this token-based payment, but you have the payment based on a certain capacity amount that you have booked previously. Okay, so that's provision throughput. Then third component, SageMaker AI endpoints. This is one of the very few occasions where SageMaker might be coming up in the exam at all. So SageMaker AI. And when would you use these endpoints is when you have a model which may have been downloaded from Hugging Face. So which is not available in the Bedrock catalog, even though that one is quite long. And that's one thing. And you may have the need for a specific instance type. Maybe you would like to run on a specific accelerated compute instance that you have figured out would be the best one. That's again something you would use a SageMaker AI endpoint for. And multi-model hosting, something that you can not do in that same sense in Bedrock. That's possible on a single SageMaker endpoint. And also if it comes to VPC isolation, that's also where SageMaker AI endpoints will be the right topic. Okay. And finally, Lambda integration pattern. So if you choose to use a Lambda function, which then in turn invokes Amazon Bedrock, that gives you some more control over authentication, for example. You can verify if the request matches your intention. Maybe you would like to avoid that model gets unnecessary requests, or you would otherwise do some additional response formatting or error handling. That's also a good use case in order to use Lambda in front of Bedrock. And don't forget that, of course, Lambdas will always be limited to 15 minutes of runtime. And if you have a long-running inference, it's better that the invocation type of Lambda should be asynchronous. So the other option is synchronous, just to avoid that you pay unnecessarily for a waiting Lambda function. And yeah, the reference is also indicated here, so you can just read further if you like. And yeah, these elements are the most helpful also to know for the exam. And hope that that is now clarified. Any questions on this? Let me just check in the chat.
Well, I have a question, Frank. Based on your
Yes.
experience, do people usually deploy one model or several models? Or do they balance the models? Do they or do they use just one for everything?
I would say that in most cases, the model deployment will be focusing on a single model. And also don't forget that there is a number of models which are multimodal. So you can both upload pictures and ask, okay, what is visible in here? But as well, you can also use text input. So that's also in some sense, it's a combination of model capabilities.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of instances where customers will use like Bedrock is great, especially for like on-demand models from labs like Anthropic and our Nova model of family. And I've seen SageMaker used a lot for like open source models where you might want to be tweaking things and adjusting them more. And I see this trend where it's like customers like, usually one deployment is one model, but I see customers really have like a model is actually just a container or just like a set of containers. And so I see customers deploying like fleets of models for different use cases, especially once you get into things like model customization and fine tuning. You might end up with scores of models that are really good at very specific tasks that you train for just your enterprise. But if you're not sure where to start, a base FM is a good starting point.
Absolutely. If some people are here which always wonder, but how can Hugging Face help me? Maybe I can give you some idea. So if you just go to Hugging Face, and then here in the models catalog, there's one model which I always pick if I try to explain what models can be helpful for from here. So that is called a Meditron. And Meditron is a fine-tuned model. It's based on the Llama 2, so that's mentioned here, Llama 2. And Meditron is fine-tuned on medical topics, so on medical questions, and it has been trained on PubMed articles and abstracts and so on. And this is a good use case for some activity that you say, okay, I have a medical-centered a chatbot, for example, and I would like to pick this model. And the best choice here would be to run this on a SageMaker AI endpoint, just as an example.
Amazing. I'm going to have to look into Metatron. That is really interesting. I'm going to have to research to see if there's any like similar ideas for like financial services fine-tuned models for my customers, because that's this is the first time I've heard of customers customizing their own, but I haven't heard of like a model on Hugging Face that's been kind of tweaked already like this. This is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also on the exam, you might see questions, or at least the exam guide covers that, the questions around balancing multiple models. How would you choose whether you route customer request to one model over another model? And that's the whole pretty important topic for understanding how to balance the models, how you would probably not configure the most expensive model up front. You would maybe route some requests to the cheaper model, do the model, plan out like model cascading. That's also the term that you will see on the guide, where you start with a simpler model, and then you route the request to a more complex model that's built in for more difficult and complex reasoning if you need the model to perform a little better for your customers. There is also static routing. When you build your own custom logic, you can say that if the request is short, then route it to this model. If the request is longer, route it to another model. But that doesn't always guarantee the best performance, because some short requests can be also very deep and complex. And something you might also see on the exam is cross-region inference. It's not really about the quality as much as about the capacity. If you experience spikes in demand, or you need additional throughput, not provisioned, not the one that's like permanently happening at this period of time, but you need to increase the throughput for spikes in demand. That's when you would look into cross-region inference. There is geographic, where you upload your data or a model within the geographic boundaries. Like I'm in the US now, so if my data is in the US and I enable geographic cross-region inference, the request can be routed to other regions in the US. And if I enable global cross-region inference, then at that point I allow to transfer the request anywhere to available AWS regions globally. Just something to remember for the exam. And we have a question about that, I believe.
Let me see. Are we talking about this one right here? about adding files to Bedrock?
The exam
Oh,
style
I'm so
question. The
sorry.
trivia question.
Yes, of course we do have a question about this. That was a fail for me. Yes.
But still, the question is quite good in the from Mike T. If you could
It
just
is.
show that again.
I was
Yeah,
looking at it. Yeah, because
yeah,
I want to hear what
absolutely.
you have to say about this one, Frank. I have thoughts, but what are your thoughts on that?
So that one is actually is focusing on, okay, I have actually something like a knowledge base. So
Yeah.
I would like the model only to look at what is already ingested as knowledge, and the model itself, what the model will do here is it will only like assemble a reasonable answer from what it has seen already in the files. Let's put it that way. And the model does make a difference for me in various ways. If you use a super intelligent, like super advanced model here, it might turn out that it will cost you more. That's something. It might also turn out it might take longer to answer. So that is a difference. And in this case, what you're describing here, I would try to use a less sophisticated and smaller model to have faster answers.
Plus
That's
one,
my
yeah.
take.
Plus one. I've seen so many knowledge base architectures where it's like knowledge base, and then they're using Opus or Sonnet, which are great models, but like, and those models are really good at one thing that smaller models may not be good at, which is reasoning. But for a task like this, you if your knowledge base is tuned correctly, you really just need regurgitation of text facts, right? So to 100%, using the biggest model would make it slower and certainly more expensive, and it might not even be that much more accurate because it's just going to be repeating the text it's pulling out of your knowledge base. So.
And Bedrock also has two really great features. It's prompt management, where you can create prompts for different types of questions. And attach a model to that prompt. So if there is a specific type of question, then it will know the format to follow, what to say within that prompt, and it will have the attached model. And then you can build out these different prompts, then go to flows in Bedrock, in the Bedrock console, and create the logic of how the communication will be routed between these different prompts that you created. Let's say if there is a positive if one model identifies positive intent in customer service field, then let's say, thank you, and can I help you with something else? So there will be the way to route the request to a model that will happily answer the question. But if there is a negative intent that's being identified, then you can route it to a different prompt that would maybe escalate. It will have the escalation steps and reassure the person that we're taking care of this, and here's what I'm going to be doing next. So that you could use different models with different prompts and then orchestrate the logic of how everything will be flowing based on the intent.
Absolutely love it. We're going to move on to our next and maybe our final of the show knowledge check question. But first, William asks, "Can I build my own coding agent on Bedrock?" You know what's wild? You can build like any AI application on Bedrock, like literally any AI application, AI agent, literally. So yes, I run my coding agent on Bedrock. I use Claude Code, and you can plug it right into Bedrock Inference. It's an incredible tool. But I digress. Let's go back to the trivia. And surprise, surprise. I hate to be the bearer of news, but we've got an Amazon employee as number one in the skillbuilder.aws. So somebody please dethrone Dash with this next question, please. I'm about to pull up the next question, but so you all can get ready, you'll want to go to. Oops, let me actually. Can I go back? All right. You know what? We're going to do it live, folks. If you want to hit this question, go to trivia.skillbuilder.com or hit this QR code and get in there to start answering. Okay. I'll paste this trivia.skillbuilder link in our chat for you folks so you can pop in. All right, and we're gonna hold tight and let you all get your answers in here, and we will walk through why the right answer was the right answer at the end. I sure hope you all were listening to Oksana, because she dropped some critical knowledge that would help you get the right answer on this one.
And by the way, this one is also a very typical questioning focus, which is the most cost-effective solution. That's pretty much like, if you think about which types of like targets do you have for a question, it is either what matches these requirements best. Okay, that's generic. Then the other one is what gives you the least operational overhead. This one is the most cost-effective one. So that's pretty much all that you can get.
That makes sense. And oh my gosh, if you start working on LLMs very long, you will at some point come across this pesky error, the too many requests error, aka the dreaded 429. The good news is these days it's pretty easy to work around the 429 as long as you're ready to consume whatever capacity that you need. But it's something you'll run into. You'll definitely run into apps getting rate limited at some point, and knowing how to deal with it is super important. Whether you're building your own app or you're like an ops team that's helping other teams launch their apps in your company. You got 5 seconds left, folks. Get those last minute answers in 3, 2, 1. Wow. Another job well done. We've got a heavy slant towards answer number 2. Let's walk folks through it. For those folks that may have looked at some other options here, but this question is pretty simple. You're getting 429 errors. You're getting too many requests errors, and you need to increase the capacity. You need to get more capacity for your application. You need to increase throughput without increasing operational overhead or changing anything. All right. So how can you do that? If we look through some of the various options, like A, for example, you could create a Lambda function, invoke Bedrock in original region, and then have a fallback to the secondary region. Believe it or not, I actually saw customers doing this before we released the feature that is the correct answer to this question. Maybe it's why we released that feature, or one of the many reasons why. But this would be not cost effective. Actually, it wouldn't be super expensive because it's Lambda, but it would certainly be a lot of operational overhead. You would be using 2 different FMs as well, like because you're splitting the request. So if it was me, I would keep looking. Another option is use prompt routing to distribute across multiple LLMs. That one you can, if you read the question carefully, you can rule that out very quickly, because the question asks specifically, we want you to use the same foundation model. Another option they say is to use provision throughput. That's where this component, the most cost effective, becomes important. In fact, it's maybe a good exercise for folks to compare the cost of like PT, provision throughput, to like an on-demand API, and you'll kind of see how with provision throughput, you have like a peak amount of requests at all times, running like 24/7. So that's great for some apps that have consistent traffic. But if you have an app that's spiking up and down, like one like this, where you have peak periods, right? An on-demand API is certainly the right choice, which leaves us with an elegant, simple solution. The solution is so simple. All you have to do is change the model ID in your invoke model or converse model request to the Bedrock API. You want to use cross-region inference, and that's going to immediately. I'll have to check the latest, but what it used to immediately get you access to 50% more tokens, based on whatever model that you're using. Maybe it was double the tokens. I need to double check my math, but that is the fastest way to get access to more tokens on Bedrock without a doubt. Sounds a lot easier than this funky. I did see a customer do this, by the way. I did see a customer build a model router that's set over top of multiple regions, and then they would load balance requests across all the regions to kind of game getting more capacity at different points in time. So save yourself the headache, folks. Just use cross-region inference. In fact, I would even say why not default to cross-region inference for most of the time you're building. That's what I do these days. Should we find out if Dash got the smackdown? If Dash has been dethroned as our leader in the trivia for today? Let's find out. Is it still Dash? Who is our winner? Who had the fastest fingers in Skill Builder today? Dash, you couldn't take it easy on him, Dash. I mean, you're a professional, man. All right, Dash, great work. Dash is the man. I guess the name 400-meter Dash holds true. He's got the fastest answers on the stream today. Dash, don't be sorry, man. I appreciate that you joined today and that we got to see you. I appreciate all the engagement and great work answering those questions. John, Lickham, everybody that participated today, you rock. We do this every week. We did it last week. We're doing it next week. If maybe you're down here, maybe VJ, Mike, maybe you need redemption. Okay, you have a chance. You have 2 chances at redemption. You can come back next week and see if we can move our way up the leaderboard. All right, because if I'm down here, I'm trying to get like Dash. If I'm you, all right.
And if you know all the answers, you wouldn't be joining us. So I'm actually really excited seeing that you're following along and you're trying. That matters the most.
Oh my gosh. And as we're winding it down, we got Raph with the jokes. At least it's not an M dash. Hey, if you know, you know. That's the fastest way to tell if somebody wrote their latest doc with AI or not, is if it's got 5 or more M dashes. That's a tell, folks. That is a tell. Great work, everyone. And by the way, like, just a reminder, if you're here, you're watching the tail end of a fun training stream where you're learning all about generative AI on AWS, how to be a generative AI developer, how to pass a beta certification that's about to GA in just a couple of months. For folks that want to know what to do next, we're going to come back next week. That's awesome. But Oksana, what should folks do in the meantime between now and next week to prepare for this exam?
My recommendation would be to start looking at the exam guide. Write down the topics that you're not familiar with. Try to go through the AWS documentation, see if there are any courses on Skill Builder, and we have a lot of them. There are 2 separate preparation plans. One is the exam prep plan that's more like an overview to help you validate those last final steps and see if you're ready for the exam. And there is the whole role-based training where you can just choose the advanced generative AI prep plan and go through a variety of courses, labs, questions to upskill in this field. And I can also show you quickly a tool, the MCP tool that I installed in Kiro CLI. You can use that for preparation purposes as well. So you see, this is Kiro. It's really simple to install. You just have to run a couple of commands. You install it in your CLI, then launch it with a Kiro -CLI command. I also installed the AWS Knowledge MCP server. I just asked Kiro, here's the link, install this MCP, and it did all the work for me, so you don't have to worry about anything. I love using Kiro because it can also help me with configurations. If I'm missing something, I just tell it what I want, and it does the magic for me, which is an amazing, also a coding companion that you can use in connection with your IDE. So for this demo, I have a question. What models support cross-region inference in Bedrock? If you do not have the MCP installed or the AWS Knowledge MCP, then Kiro will just search the web and try to find the answers that best match your question. If with this specific MCP, what's going to happen is that Kiro will go in live mode and look through the AWS documentation, fetch the content, and bring it back to me. You see, one of the actions it's taking is it's going to connect to the server, to the knowledge server, and then it starts looking for the content that I need. So you can, if you'd like to streamline your preparation, or if you go through the exam style questions, you can use Kiro to help you with your prep work. It can give you the answers right away. It can clarify some questions, and you wouldn't have to spend hours on going through the documentation, especially for people who are not very comfortable with that. It might be a little overwhelming. This way you get the answers up front.
Man, if only you could take your Kiro assistant into the exam center with you, that
Right.
would sure help. But no, I mean, absolutely. Like using AI as a study tool is like so good, especially when you have pointed questions or like if I'm taking an exam and or a practice exam and I don't really understand the concepts, I'll just like ask a chat assistant. Super good call out here. What tool is this, by the way? This is Kiro, but I've only seen the Kiro that looks like Visual Studio Code. This is the first time I've seen this fancy CLI contraption. What are we looking at here, Oksana?
This is Kiro CLI. You just you can search for Kiro and choose the CLI section. I don't have it open, unfortunately, but I will share. Maybe our chat Smees will be able to quickly bring up the link and share it in chat. So you just install it in your CLI. It's really simple. You just have to run 2 or 3 commands, install the package, and then it's there. It's ready to do anything you want. And the key difference is that with the we have the MCP servers were originally designed by Anthropic, and there are many communities that create additional ones. They support those. We have lots of AWS MCP servers for all kinds of purposes. You can create your own MCP. You can add the MCP in the Lambda function and have your agent connect to that MCP server. Use it as a tool to do something, and then the agent will bring you back the result. And that's basically what it's doing. And this is like, it's not exactly as the knowledge base. With knowledge bases, you have static files, you store them somewhere in S3, then the tool is looking for keywords or some content. This is just searching live the AWS documentation. So you have the latest and greatest information available to you anytime you need to access it.
And maybe that add that to your home fund. If you've never used an MCP capable client like an IDE or CLI like Kiro, get yourself some MCP servers installed. They're free, right? They're just basically hitting web pages that are public web pages. And I heard a lot of smart people talking about MCP when it got hot on the market. And I was actually kind of confused by it until I just used a couple of MCP servers. Like, oh, whoa, this is super simple and an incredible way to automate tasks and do research and all that good stuff. Everybody, you've been amazing. Just like our friend in the chat said, if you would like to do something between now and next week, you're going to want to go to Mike P. Funk said it best, Skill Builder. Check it out. You can find plenty more AI training and all that good stuff. Tune back in next week, same time, same place, same people, and we're going to dig into domain 3 of this AWS certification. Have a good week ahead, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in.